What is up, Waffle Gang? I do hope you are well. My name is Mark, and today we're covering some r/malicious compliance. Surprise you there, right? If you are new here, please consider hitting that like, that subscribe, and maybe that notification bell too, as it all really does help out our channel. And let's just crack on with today's stories. Much love, guys. Now, our first story comes from Hey Pesky, called "Sorry, you revoked my overtime privileges yesterday." This was several years ago when I worked at a redacted big name coffee shop. My shift was 5 AM to 1:30 PM, and often around 1 PM, giant groups of kids on school field trips would come through the area. This was a coffee shop located in a major CA city, very close to a bunch of museums. I'd been working a lot of overtime because of it, to help my co-workers through the rush. I got written up by my supervisor for doing too many overtime shifts without approval. I was explicitly informed to not work overtime again. I'd lost overtime privileges until corporate deemed I could have them again, and working overtime again prior to that would result in further disciplinary action. The day after I was written up, right as my shift ended, 3 big buses full of kids unloaded and filled the shop. At 1:30 PM on the dot, my watch alarm went off and I went to go clock out. The store manager who wrote me up the day prior said, "Wait, where are you going?" I reminded her that I'd lost my overtime privileges, clocked out, retrieved the shift drink I'd made for myself right before the rush, and left. The next day I was informed my overtime privileges had been reinstated. Edits. Whoa, this took off in a way I didn't expect. This was almost a decade ago when I was in my early 20s and an eager to please employee, so I didn't demand they take the write-up off my record, unfortunately. My co-workers all knew about the write-up and were pissed about it too, so none of them were mad when I spite left to prove a point. I worked the super morning shift by choice because I used to be a morning person, because the field trips were super sporadic and there was no way to predict them without knowing the field trip schedules of the entire region. Our manager had somehow managed to avoid her ever experiencing one, since she typically left around noon. When she saw what they were like and started believing us, they scheduled one afternoon shift people to come in an hour early, so we had a better overlap. And JP Cog says on this one, yes, the joys of incompetent management. Good job teaching them a lesson. Followed by Happy Reddit Gift says, it was the only right thing to do after they wrote you up like that without even studying why you had to go in overtime. And that is the major problem here, is that they wasn't questioning why you was needing all this overtime. They just thought you was taking the piss. So you had absolutely the right to do what you did in that situation, I think. And Bandit Foo says, who do you think you are, helping out co-workers and doing more work than you should? Your manager, probably. And Mercury Mad Hatter said, I did something similar once, except I was the general manager and I was told by my superiors I couldn't use overtime for my employees. I'd just taken over a seriously in the red store that was understaffed. This was the 3rd time I was flipping a store for the company. I knew how it was done. So I agreed I wouldn't use the overtime. Instead, I used a clause that whenever a GM takes over a new store, they can retain their employees. I got an email agreeing to retaining for my location, and oh look, 20 hours of training for each employee, on top of their regular hours. Could this be overtime? No, it's training. I had a lot of retraining for the first month, and a lot of happy delivery drivers. Have you ever been in a similar situation where you've worked overtime and got told off for it before? I'd be very interested to know about that in the comments. When I used to work for, here I go again, for a market research company, and it was a very random job. It's one of these jobs that you don't really expect to hear about, but my job is that I had to get competitor products for big brands. So say I was doing some research for a chocolate company, let's say Cadbury's for example, and they had changed the amount of sugar they put in their product. They would then do a B, C, and D test with other competitors, so you'd have to go to the supermarkets and buy those chocolates, and they all had to be the same batch code, so they was all made on the same date and all that sort of stuff. They've been through the transportation system and all that kind of thing. And sometimes doing that would take an incredible amount of overtime, because I would have to travel far and wide to get the same batch codes for these chocolates. And it happened one month when I was doing one of these chocolate tests, and I'd done hours and hours of overtime, had to stay in hotels in different locations to get these things, and I was called up about it. And you know, the next test I didn't do the overtime and they absolutely kicked up a stink about it. Why didn't you do that? Why aren't you doing the overtime to get this test done? It's going to cost us thousands and thousands of pounds if we don't get this done. Yet they denied me of like, what, £200 in overtime. It's ridiculous, right? And I brought that up and then they seemed to agree with me afterwards. So absolutely call out these shitheads who do this kind of thing. And our next story comes from NoFinger2501. I can't order a drink you're advertising and have opened ingredients for. Fine. Not sure if it fits here or there is a more suitable sub, but here goes. I'm in the UK and was with friends at one of the main coffee shop brands. I won't say which one, but it's similar to Cost a Lot. It was a few days after Christmas last year, important for later. When I was served by the barista, it was obvious I was going to have an experience. This guy acted haughtily and spoke to people with a sneer, and came across like he considered himself a prince among men. He had a long floppy fringe and he kept brushing out his contempt-filled eyes every few seconds. He clearly didn't want to be there or deal with the likes of me. Awkward for both of us. It was a two-man team, so a barista would take the order and make the drink, so we had to make whatever anyone ordered. It was very early January and the shop still had advertisements for Christmas seasonal drinks. I'm a fan of uncommon flavoured coffee or hot chocolate, and said shop was advertising a Black Forest hot chocolate. Black Forest is basically dark chocolate, black cherry and cream. I ordered one and the barista looked me up and down and sneered, "That's a Christmas drink." I said yes. The barista said, "It's after Christmas." I said yes. Now the barista is smirking and said, "So I can't make you a Christmas drink." And I said, "But you're advertising it and you still got the ingredients open behind the counter." This drink is basically a shot of the flavoured sauce, hot chocolate and cream on top. It's not that onerous or taxing to make compared to a normal hot chocolate. It's literally a normal hot chocolate with a flavoured syrup put in. Barista sighing and rolling his eyes, "It's not available right now." I wondered if he was being a tool for some unknown superiority complex, was being lazy and didn't want to make this beverage, or if there really was some directive, so I threw up a weather balloon question. I say, "Okay fine, in that case, would I be able to buy a single shot of flavoured syrup please? It says they have 35p on the board." The barista dismissively says, "I don't see why not." And I say, "Can I order a shot of the black cherry syrup there, but in a medium-sized takeaway cup?" Barista tuts and silently turns, gets a shot of said syrup in a cup for me, and contemptuously places it in front of me. "Anything else?" he sneers. Cue my malicious compliance. I slide the cup back to him and say, "Can you make a medium hot chocolate in this cup for me please, and stir it well before you put in the whipped cream on top?" Barista grimaces and realises I've followed his instructions completely and still got myself a Black Forest hot chocolate. I stand and watch him make it, which he does with the most reluctant and bitter energy imaginable. For the record, it was pretty good. Now I'm really surprised that the barista didn't see this coming from very early on that he was going to be doing this, but I just love the way you slide it back to him and say, "Can you just fill that up with my hot chocolate?" But Photo Louis says, "PB, it's after Christmas." I'm Eastern Orthodox. Are you going to pull that religious discrimination shit on me? And Nom says, "I live near San Francisco and used to be a barista. You can't turn around without running into a coffee shop with this guy in it. I think there's an entire chain here that specializes in that guy, except they refuse to make you anything except black coffee that literally takes 8 minutes to make. For one cup. I'm so confused by that. I would love to know what happened to make it so hard to just get a cup of drip coffee where I put my own cream and sweeteners into. And I'm a driving instructor, so if I'm teaching in SF that day, it's all but impossible. It's either Starbucks with no parking, or it's ultra pretentious snobby coffee that cost me a month's paycheck and comes with a side order of attitude." And Ginger Penguin says, "I used to frequent that chain and that was my go-to evening drink, lol. My local one would happily do Christmas drink all year round, so as long as they had the flavours." And Drunk Starcraft says, "In this case, the guy was in Nimitz class douche canoe." I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, but I do have something to add to this that can sometimes occur. If a place is a franchise, corporate may have direct control over the entire till at all times. They can add or remove buttons and make it so you can't free ring in things either, making it impossible to ring in an order that isn't from their decided menu for that season, month, day. Source worked and managed at 3 different franchises, 2 of them had this issue. And yeah, that probably is the case with some of them, but this guy in this story did sound like he was just being an ass, just for the sake of it, right? But now I turn it to you guys. Have you guys ever had this guy over at a coffee shop before? Let me know in the comments below. And our next story is from Meowschwitz in there. Won't let me plant sunflowers. Fine. Story happened a couple of years ago, but it's my favourite lawyer story and I hope you enjoy. None of the following is legal advice. Don't take legal advice from randos on the internet. Client walks into the office and asks us for a contract review. He then hands over a HOA contract. Before slogging through a whole HOA contract, I ask him what he was hoping to accomplish. They want me to dig up my sunflowers. They say, your sunflowers? Yes, I planted a row outside my house. They pranced by and said the sunflowers are not allowed per contract I signed. So I want you to tell me if that's true or not. Sir, before anything else, I need to tell you this would unlikely be an hourly fee bill. HOAs are notorious for dragging things out, so these could quickly become expensive sunflowers. He says, I don't care, this is America, and I should be able to plant sunflowers, god damn it. Still thinking he was that serious about sunflowers, I asked for a 3-hour retainer. He immediately pulled out a checkbook and paid for 4 hours, so I buckled down to review the alleged anti-sunflower clause. Just for reference, the sunflowers he wanted to plant were really big, 5 foot, and all along the front of the house. It was a very substantial amount of sunflowers. The contract did indeed contain a clause with a very thorough list on which plants were and were not allowed to be planted. The list had about every plant I could think of in alphabetical order. Think apple, banana, cauliflower, dill, sunflowers included. Corn was not included, which becomes very important later. Quick legal point, if you write no dogs allowed, it is normally assumed you are talking about all dogs generally. If you write no labs, golden retrievers or poodles allowed, it is normally assumed that all other dogs are allowed. Sometimes a not great attorney will write a super long list to pad hours, i.e. charge more, instead of just writing no plants with prior approval or something. I called the client back in for the bad news and explaining the above legal point. I let him know the HOA got a raw deal from whoever drafted the contract. And it says, no can do on the sunflowers, but if it makes you feel any better, they were probably overbilled by whoever wrote this contract. Pretty shoddy work too. They even forgot to write down corn, but they included nonsense like dragon fruit. And then says, so yes to corn, no to sunflowers. I didn't really check the contract for corn, but it's not prohibited in the plant section, so probably. And he says, excellent, that'll work. I thought he was oddly happy with the bad news. Then 2 or 3 weeks later, he came in with a picture of his house, surrounded by huge sunflowers. What happened? This guy drove out to the country and bought obnoxiously large and ugly corn stalks. He promptly planted them where the sunflowers had been. When confronted by the HOA, he told them, paraphrasing, to suck it, the contract lets me plant corn. Then after some negotiation, he agreed to take the corn down in exchange for permission to plant sunflowers. Now we are friends, he is still a great client, and he lives surrounded by ridiculous motes of sunflowers. I think I would love to see a house surrounded by sunflowers like that. I don't think that would be a bad sight, do you? And it's one of those crazy HOA stories that we used to read a while back, and I just find HOAs absolutely insane, man. But Texas Vulva Aficionado says, it's also usually an end to a HOA fight if you go with something like, I was going to spend my hobby time on thing I actually wanted that they declined, but my second choice will be installing a large ham radio tower that you can't argue against due to the FCC's emergency broadcasting regulations. For your information. And Jita says, ah yes, the put something worse so you get the thing you want. I'd love to see a community with gardens out front. It'd be better than just grass, and they can do a food swap after harvest. And Nimala says, that guy's got a good head on his shoulders. He's also consulted the right lawyer. Great story. And Becca says, HOAs are a deal breaker for me. If I buy a house, I want to be able to make my own choices about my own property. What the fuck? And Security6 says, either this guy has fuck you money or he's just had enough of being trampled on, and he's by God gonna have his way on one thing. Now, what do you guys think of this story? Do you think he was doing the right thing in this situation when he went away and planted corn stalks just to get what he wanted? Or do you think he's a bit of an ass for doing it? I know it's totally wrong subreddit here, but let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And our next story comes from Blackbird named Jude. He wanted all his stuff back, so I made sure he got everything. I posted this in r/petty revenge, and a lot of people thought it would fit well here. I just copied and pasted it right from my other post, obligatory on my mobile, so forgive me for formatting. So my last relationship was beyond bad. He was all sorts of abusive and controlling. At one point I had the strength to break up with him, but then got back together after we discussed some things. Stupid, I know, but yeah, love and all that. Well, anyways, one of my things we agreed on was that he and I would stop drinking alcohol because he was beyond crazy aggressive when he drank, and I wanted to support his sobriety. This is really important. Fast forward about 8 months or so, and we got into a huge fight, and I not only broke up with him, I kicked him out of the house and told him he wasn't ever allowed back inside. We'd been living together for over a year at this point, so his mum got in touch with me about getting his stuff. While on the phone with her, I could hear him in the background saying, "Make sure they get everything I own or bought. I want it all back." Apparently, even stuff he gifted me, he wanted back, but I honestly didn't care. I was happy to get rid of anything related to him. While cleaning our room up and gathering everything, I started to come across numerous bottles and cans of alcohol. It seems he had been drinking again for a while and was hiding the evidence in the room. I mean, he was hiding them under the bed, in his guitar case, rolled up in his clothes, in some old backpacks of mine, and so on and so forth. He had said he wanted everything of his, so any bottle and a few unopened cans I found went straight into one of those garbage bags of his stuff. By the time I gathered everything up, I had 3 bags of stuff and one was basically just all alcohol. Dropping him off was just so satisfying. He actually called moments after I left his parents' place, ranting about how petty and immature I was being. My response? Well, you wanted all your stuff back, and those definitely weren't mine. Plus, I'd figured you'd probably need a drink to deal with the breakup. I promptly ended the call and blocked him on everything. Most satisfying thing I've ever done. Edit. Firstly, thank you for everyone for the words of encouragement and everything. This happened years ago, but knowing people are still proud of me for leaving means the world to me. Also, there's definitely a lot to this story that didn't get posted, such as cops having to be involved and other things. I didn't put open cans or unscrew bottle lids just for the fact I didn't want to risk ruining this stuff, as that'd be a huge headache and everything. Yes, and of course, obligatory, well done you for escaping an abusive relationship. And for not being petty about it, you didn't open the cans, you didn't, ruin his stuff. And it's probably the very mature thing to do because he would have been back into your life, who knows, might be legal stuff then as well. So you've done totally the right thing there. But next attitude says, good for you, it takes willpower to leave a bad relationship. One of my favourite quotes was from Robin Williams. I used to think the worst thing in life was to end up alone. It's not. The worst thing in life is to end up with people who make you feel alone. And Hiram Goldberg says, good riddance to bad rubbish, both figuratively and literally. Good for you. Level 27 Jenny Bro says, oh god, I know exactly what you mean about the hidden bottles. My ex was an alcoholic and he didn't tell me when we got together, so I thought drinking was cool around him. It spiraled into a clusterfuck. I ended up finding all sorts of different bottles in weird places, behind DVDs on the shelf, tucked into shoes that were in a donation pile, inside an empty box for a game console, inside the mattress covered up against the wall, hidden in the substrate in the snake tank. What? And Baby Moshi says, lol, honestly, I thought you showed restraint. I would have been canvassing the trash cans to see what I could send mixed in with his clothes. Can I ask what the final straw was? What caused the fight? And Billy Ray Viruses says, after my last serious girlfriend broke up with me, she called. It was about a year later, and I was so excited. She said, I thought of you last night. I said, really? She said, yes, I was vacuuming and found one of your liquor bottles under the couch. That hurt. It really hurt. I had stopped drinking after we broke up. Rehab, etc. Fast forward 15 years, still sober and happily married. Not to her. Hang in there, OP. And Self-Educated said, friends did this, her and spouse split up. He moved to another country, house had to be sold, he didn't help with packing but said he cleaned out the garage. He asked her to ship his tools that remained in the garage. She did, cash on delivery, including all the garbage and junk that he hadn't cleaned up. And I'm assuming that was cash on delivery. Hoofhearted 523 says, now cleanse yourself of his toxic energy he left behind. You don't have to delete this post, although the more people who interact with it, the longer your mind stays in a toxic space relating to him. Go do something for yourself to show yourself the love you always deserve. Or don't, I won't hold it to you because I'm an internet stranger. Love you, OP. And Miss Kim said, I would have loaded up an open box with alcohol bottles and handed it to his mum so she could see exactly what his problem is. And OP replied to this saying, oh, she knew. She used to make excuses and actually sent me a long message after we broke up about how when you love someone you forgive their faults and blah blah blah. She definitely enabled him a lot. Wow. Now I'm going to turn this one to you guys. What do you think of the situation? And was there ever any way around it in the end? I don't think there probably was, apart from splitting up, because clearly he's got a massive problem. If you're hiding stuff around, hiding alcohol around the house, that's really dodgy, right? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Once again, guys, thank you for being here today. I hope you did enjoy today's stories, and if you did, you know what to do. Hit that like, that subscribe, and maybe that notification bell too. And do you like malicious compliance? Let me know, because I will continue to do different subreddits like when I can. Obviously, our main one is always going to be Am I the Arsehole? But I will cover other ones when we can, if you enjoy them, of course. You have to let me know on that one. But I will see you in the next one. Much love, guys.